Most people imagine death as quick or peaceful, but sometimes it's the exact opposite. Some people leave this world in ways so brutal, strange, or drawn out that it's hard to believe they're real. In this video, we'll break down 5 true stories of people who died in some of the worst ways ever recorded. Moments where pain, fear, and confusion took over. These are not made-up tales. These are real, and they are disturbing. It was February 2004 in Murrow, a quiet village in Cambridgeshire, England. Ronald McClagish, a 51-year-old father of 2 and former motorcycle mechanic, had recently separated from his partner. He lived alone in a small bungalow and had ongoing health issues, including asthma and a liver condition. He was known to be in poor health, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what was about to happen to him. Just a few weeks after the breakup, Ronald went to clean out his ex-girlfriend's belongings from a bedroom cupboard. It was meant to be a routine task, but something went terribly wrong. While he was inside the built-in cupboard, a large wardrobe tipped over and landed in just the wrong way, pressing firmly against the cupboard door. The wardrobe was heavy and stood on a level concrete floor, which made it impossible for the door to be opened from the inside. Ronald was trapped. At first, it was believed Ronald tried to stay calm. He likely attempted to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. As time passed and no one came, he realized he was completely stuck. With no phone, no food, and no way out, he started searching for anything that could help. Inside the cupboard was a copper water pipe. In desperation, Ronald broke it off, possibly hoping to use it as a tool to pry open the door, but instead water started pouring into the small space, and it didn't stop. Now, not only was he trapped in a tight, dark space, but he was also soaking wet and cold. The water had no place to drain. Still, he tried to use the pipe to hit the inside of the door, trying to break free, but his efforts failed. As the hours turned into days, Ronald grew weaker. The freezing water made things worse. His asthma and overall poor health made it harder for him to fight. In the end, he remained inside that cupboard for almost a week, alone, wet, freezing, and unable to escape. His home was quiet and detached. No one heard his cries for help. Nobody even realized he was missing. Eventually, neighbors started to worry. They hadn't seen him in nearly 2 weeks. Some had also heard strange banging noises, possibly from Ronald hitting the cupboard with the pipe. On February 15th, police were sent to check on him. Officers forced their way into the house. It was cold and silent inside. In one bedroom, they noticed the wardrobe lying on its side, tightly pressed against the cupboard. Then they saw something chilling, a pair of feet sticking out from beneath the cupboard door. Ronald had passed away. The officers had to work together to move the wardrobe because of its weight. When they opened the cupboard, they found Ronald's body. Water was still flowing from the broken pipe. He had likely died days earlier. At first, investigators thought it might have been something suspicious. The scene was strange, but there were no signs of forced entry, no stolen items, and no injuries that suggested anyone else was involved. Eventually, they ruled out any outside involvement. Still, Ronald's brother William had doubts. He didn't believe the wardrobe could have just fallen on its own. He even wondered if someone might have tried to rob Ronald, but police disagreed. One officer pointed to marks on the wall that showed the wardrobe had tipped over before. The coroner described it as an unusual accident. The official cause of death was bronchitis, a serious lung condition that can make breathing difficult. The cold water may have made it worse, but he might have already been sick before he got trapped. Because of this, the coroner gave an open verdict, meaning the exact cause wasn't fully clear. Ronald's final days were spent trapped in a space no bigger than a closet. Every attempt to escape failed, and when help finally arrived, it was too late. It was August 12, 2000, in the cold waters of the Barents Sea. A massive Russian nuclear submarine named Kursk, over 500 feet long and nearly 19,400 tons, was taking part in a routine military exercise. It was one of the largest submarines in the world and considered the pride of the Russian Navy. But by the end of that day, it was resting at the bottom of the sea, and all 118 crew members were gone. The Kursk had been built during the Cold War. It was designed to destroy large enemy ships and carried powerful P-700 Granite missiles. It also had 2 nuclear reactors and could travel underwater for long periods without being detected. To many, it seemed impossible to destroy. But just before noon that day, something went terribly wrong. At 11:20 a.m., a sudden explosion shook the area. A little over 2 minutes later, a second, much larger explosion was recorded, so powerful it was picked up by seismic monitors as far away as Alaska. Soon after, Russian officials confirmed the Kursk had stopped responding. It had dropped to the sea floor around 354 feet deep. At first, there was confusion. Some officials said it might have hit an old mine from World War II. Others believed it may have collided with another submarine. Some even said it could have been caused by a secret weapon test, but none of those explanations held up. Later investigations showed that one of the Kursk's torpedoes had leaked hydrogen peroxide, a chemical used as fuel. When this chemical comes into contact with certain metals like silver, it causes a fast and violent reaction. That chemical reaction likely triggered the first explosion, which set off a chain reaction with the rest of the torpedoes. 2 minutes later, a second, much larger blast ripped open the submarine. The Russian government refused offers of help from other countries. The president at the time, Vladimir Putin, stayed on vacation. For 5 days, Russian officials said they had things under control. They even claimed they had made contact with survivors. None of it was true. Rescue teams weren't allowed in until it was too late. Not all of the sailors died right away. In the back of the submarine, 23 crew members survived the blasts. One of them, Lieutenant Captain Dmitry Koselnikov, wrote a note in the dark confirming they were still alive, but the conditions were impossible. The lights were out, temperatures dropped, oxygen was running out, the air was filling with toxic gas. Water slowly began leaking into the compartment. These men, trained professionals, were trapped with no way out. By the time divers finally reached the wreck, everyone was gone. After the accident, comparisons were made to a similar 1955 incident in Britain, where a hydrogen peroxide leak caused a deadly explosion on the submarine Sidon. Both cases involved the same kind of torpedo and the same type of chemical reaction. Even after all of this, Russian officials denied that a torpedo malfunction was to blame. Instead, they claimed that the Kursk had collided with a submarine belonging to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and even cited satellite images as evidence. But experts disagreed. The timing and power of the two blasts clearly pointed to torpedoes as the cause. When the Kursk was brought back to the surface, the front part, where the torpedo room was left behind. Officials said it was too risky to recover because it might still have explosives. But critics believe it was left behind to avoid further investigation. Families waited for days with no real answers. When Putin finally met with them, many were angry and heartbroken. Lawyer Boris Kuznetsov, who represented the families, claimed Putin made inappropriate comments in private. Kuznetsov later left Russia after writing a book about the case. No one was ever held responsible. The official explanation stayed vague, but the facts remained. 118 sailors died, some instantly. Others spent their last hours trapped cold and in the dark, waiting for a rescue that never came. It was June 25, 2015, in Dacula, Georgia. Mansur Blount, a 37-year-old technician, arrived at a Publix grocery store for a job he had done many times before. He wasn't an employee of the store. He was there to clean the vent hood above the fryer station, a task he handled regularly as a professional vent hood technician. To do the job, Mansur had to climb onto a thin metal cover that had been placed over the fryer. From the outside, it looked strong enough to hold a person's weight, but it wasn't, and no one had told him otherwise. At that moment, the fryer underneath the cover was filled with hot cooking oil. When Mansur stepped on the cover and began his work, it suddenly gave way. His left leg dropped straight into the boiling oil. The burns he suffered were extremely severe, deep enough to damage muscle and tissue. He was rushed to Grady Memorial Hospital, one of the largest trauma centers in Georgia, where doctors tried everything to save him. For 9 days, Mansur stayed in the hospital receiving intense treatment for his injuries, but despite all efforts, his condition worsened. On July 4, 2015, Mansur passed away due to the injuries from that fall. He had simply been doing his job. After his death, serious questions were raised. His wife, Chrissy McGee Blount, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Publix. She said her husband was never told that the metal cover was unsafe to step on. According to the lawsuit, there were no signs, no barriers, nothing to warn him about the danger. The metal sheet looked like a platform, but it wasn't built to support the weight of an adult. If Mansur had known that, he never would have stepped on it. Chrissy's lawsuit wasn't just about compensation. She wanted the store to be held responsible. She filed for the full value of the life of Mansur Blount, along with legal costs. Her argument was clear. Mansur didn't die because of his own actions. He died because no one had taken the time to put proper safety warnings in place. Publix declined to comment publicly on the case. They didn't explain what happened or share details about their safety protocols. The lawsuit remains one of the only sources of information about the incident. What makes this case more troubling is that Mansur was experienced. He had likely worked in hundreds of commercial kitchens. Vent hood cleaning is a routine but dangerous job. It often means working around hot equipment like ovens and fryers. That's why safety is so important. Mansour's story spread across Georgia, making headlines in major outlets like the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They reported the details clearly, how his leg fell through a thin metal sheet into boiling oil, and how that injury eventually took his life. Another report described the burns using harsh language to explain how bad the damage was. The case sparked a larger conversation. When outside workers enter commercial spaces, are they being properly warned about risks? Are they being given enough information to keep themselves safe? According to Mansour's family, the answer in this case was no. Mansour assumed the space was safe. That one wrong assumption, caused by a lack of warning, cost him his life. He was 37 years old. He was doing a routine job. And no one told him the metal cover couldn't hold his weight. That was all it took. One small detail that no one spoke up about. And now, a man is gone. It was November 26, 2018, deep in the Yukon wilderness of Canada. Valerie Theoret, a 37-year-old school teacher on maternity leave, was living off-grid with her partner, Germund Rochelt, and their 10-month-old daughter, Adele. They were staying in a remote cabin near Einarsson Lake, planning to spend the winter there. It wasn't a short adventure. They had bought the cabin 3 years earlier and often lived there. They knew the risks of the wilderness and followed safety rules to avoid attracting wild animals. That morning, the three had breakfast together. Afterward, Germund left on his snowmobile to check his trap line, while Valerie stayed at the cabin with Adele. Sometime between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., she likely decided to go for a walk with her daughter, who was in a baby carrier on her back. The weather was cold, but the wilderness was calm. Unknown to her, something dangerous was nearby. About 240 meters from the cabin, an 18-year-old male grizzly bear was hiding behind a thick tree. The bear was in poor condition, starving, sick, and badly injured. It had eaten a porcupine recently, and the quills had damaged its digestive system, making it difficult and painful to eat. It weighed only 137 kilograms, far below what a grizzly needs to survive the winter. It couldn't hibernate and was acting out of desperation. At that point, the bear had stopped avoiding humans. It had become dangerous. Authorities later found that the bear had followed the snowmobile trail Germund left behind. It slowly made its way toward the cabin, but didn't attack right away. It waited. Valerie and Adele likely walked past the bear without knowing it was there. Hidden just 2 meters from the trail, the bear suddenly attacked. There was no warning, no time to react. Officials later said the attack was quick and silent. Both Valerie and Adele lost their lives almost instantly. They didn't suffer long, but the attack was violent. Around 3 p.m., Germund returned and sensed something was wrong. The area was quiet. That's when the bear charged at him. He was armed, as many trappers are, and fired 4 shots. One bullet hit a vital spot and the bear died, but the damage had already been done. Germund searched around and found Valerie and Adele lying lifeless outside the cabin. He called for help immediately. The nearest town, Mayo, was almost 250 miles away. By 3:45 p.m., the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were on the case. A full investigation followed. Experts from the coroner's office and Environment Yukon pieced together what had happened. They discovered that the bear had followed Germund's trail, but changed behavior once it spotted Valerie and Adele. It stopped dragging its feet and began moving with purpose, hiding in the brush before attacking. This wasn't a defensive move. It was a calculated action by an animal in survival mode. Valerie was a well-loved teacher in Whitehorse, where she taught French immersion. Her friends and co-workers described her as kind and deeply respected. Adele was just a baby. The loss was painful for many in the community. People gathered that night to grieve. Yukon's chief coroner confirmed this was only the 3rd fatal bear attack in the region over 2 decades. These attacks are extremely rare. The family had taken every known precaution. Their food was stored safely. Bait was kept far away. Nothing they did attracted the bear. The bear's condition, old, injured, and starving, made it act in a way healthy bears usually don't. A necropsy confirmed it had no fat, had damaged organs, and had been suffering for weeks. Officials said nothing could have prevented the attack. There were no warning signs. This wasn't about negligence. It was a tragic encounter with a wild animal at the end of its life. Valerie and Adele had simply gone for a walk. They never came back. It was August 22, 2019 in New York City. Sam Weisbren, a 30-year-old tech executive, was leaving his apartment at Manhattan Promenade, a luxury high-rise located at the corner of East 25th Street and 3rd Avenue in the Kips Bay neighborhood. Like any other day, he stepped into the elevator, but this time, he wouldn't make it out. At around 8:15 a.m., Sam stepped into the elevator with 5 other people. When they reached the lobby, the doors opened. One man walked out safely. Sam followed, but just as he stepped forward, the elevator suddenly dropped. He was halfway out when the car plunged toward the basement. Sam reached out, grabbed the doorframe, and tried to push himself forward. One foot was already on the lobby floor, but the elevator didn't stop. It kept falling, trapping Sam between the car and the shaft wall. The impact was immediate. He didn't survive. His injuries were to the neck and torso. The city medical examiner later said the cause of death was blunt force trauma and mechanical asphyxia. The 5 other people in the elevator were trapped but not hurt. Firefighters responded quickly and helped bring them to safety. Witnesses nearby were shocked by what they saw. Surveillance footage caught the entire thing. It showed Sam's final moments, how close he came to getting out. The man ahead of him had just exited when the elevator fell. Sam was next, but the sudden drop gave him no time. One of the building workers later recalled that Sam had been trying to climb out while the elevator was still moving. He reached out, but it was already too late. According to emergency responders, Sam had no chance of surviving. An investigation was launched by the NYPD, the city's Department of Buildings, and the Department of Investigation. Officials didn't share full details, but made it clear that something serious had gone wrong. Manhattan Promenade is a 23-story building built in 1997 with 2 elevators. Sam was in the one that had no past safety violations. The other elevator had already been flagged in May for a serious issue. A required safety device called a door zone restrictor had been tampered with. That device keeps elevator doors from opening between floors. The building's management company, ATA Enterprises, was fined. Though this was a different elevator from the one Sam was in, the violation raised questions. Tenants said both elevators had problems for years. Reporter Sefan Kim from ABC7 said residents described the elevators as unreliable, comparing rides to a haunted house. Some said the cars shook, stopped randomly, or failed to shut their doors. A resident named Sonia said the elevators had been problematic for years. People had complained, but nothing ever changed. Others noted that residents got stuck almost every week. Although complaints were filed, little was done to address the issues. Sam's father, Dr. Charles Weisbren, later shared that Sam had often talked about the elevator problems. He had been frustrated, and his father believed other tenants felt the same. Sam had moved to New York from Milwaukee 5 years earlier and was doing well in his career. Dr. Weisbren also remarked that tenants were paying thousands of dollars in rent and deserved at the very least to be kept safe. CB Insights, Sam's employer, said he was a kind and smart person who would be missed. After Sam's passing, residents gathered to demand change. More than 50 people met with an attorney and were advised to start a tenants association and consider withholding rent. Many said ATA Enterprises gave little response after the accident. Just a brief email calling it an incident, followed days later by a promise to replace parts. The city sent an elevator attendant to ride with tenants, but problems continued. Some residents walked up dozens of stairs out of fear. One woman with children said she was in pain from all the walking. Elevator safety expert Kevin Doherty explained that this type of failure typically involves multiple system breakdowns or someone bypassing standard safety protocols. He emphasized that elevators are designed not to move when the doors are open, stating that such an incident should not occur unless something had gone seriously wrong. A memorial fund was started in Sam's name. The donations support a youth basketball program in Milwaukee, where Sam played as a child. Sam Weisbren had built a life in New York, but one faulty machine, long ignored, ended everything in a second.